Every day at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Kofi would hear the music start. The sound came from the big cafe on the corner of the street where he lived with his grandmother. It was not just any music. It was the kind of music that made his heart beat faster and his feet want to move. The music had a piano, and that piano was the most beautiful thing Kofi had ever heard. Kofi was 12 years old and had lived in the big city of Accra for only 6 months. Before that, he lived in a small village with his mother and father, but his parents died in a car accident, and now he lived with his grandmother in a tiny room above a shop that sold soap and candy. His grandmother was kind but very tired. She worked cleaning offices all night long to pay for their food and the small room where they slept. The boy had never seen a real piano before he came to the city. In his village, there was only one old radio that sometimes worked. When it did work, it played music that sounded scratchy and far away. But the piano at the cafe was different. It was right there, real and close. He could see the black and white keys. He could see the man's fingers moving up and down. He could hear every single note as clear as water. Kofi would walk past the cafe every day when he went to buy bread for his grandmother. She gave him money every morning and told him to get the cheapest bread he could find. The cafe was not on the way to the cheap bread shop, but Kofi always took the long way around just to hear the music. He would slow down when he got close to the cafe. Sometimes he would stop completely and listen. The cafe had small round tables outside on the sidewalk. People sat there drinking coffee and eating food that smelled wonderful. They wore nice clothes and had clean shoes. They talked and laughed while the music played. Most of them did not really listen to the music. They just let it play in the background while they did other things. This made Kofi feel sad. How could they not listen to something so beautiful? The piano player was a tall man with brown skin and kind eyes. He wore a white shirt and black pants every day. His fingers moved on the keys like they were dancing. Sometimes he would close his eyes while he played, and his face would look peaceful and happy. Next to him sat another man with a shiny golden instrument that Kofi later learned was called a saxophone. The saxophone man had lighter skin and yellow hair. He would blow into his instrument and make sounds that went up and down with the piano music. There was also a third man who sat behind a set of drums. He had dark skin and spoke with an accent that sounded different from everyone else. He would hit the drums with wooden sticks, but not hard. He hit them gentle and soft, making a rhythm that held all the other music together like glue. The three men played together every day from 2 o'clock until 4 o'clock. They played songs that made Kofi think of rain falling on leaves. They played songs that made him think of birds flying high in the sky. They played songs that made him think of his mother singing to him when he was small and lived in the village. After the first week of listening, Kofi started to notice something strange happening to him. When he got home after hearing the music, he would find himself humming the songs. His fingers would move like they were pressing invisible keys. He would tap rhythms on the table while his grandmother cooked their simple dinner of rice and soup. His grandmother noticed too. "What is that sound you are making, child?" she asked one evening. "It is music, Grandmama," Kofi said. "There are men who play music at the cafe on the corner. The music is so beautiful it stays in my head even when I am not there." His grandmother smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Music is for people with money, Kofi. We must focus on important things like food and having a place to sleep." But Kofi could not stop thinking about the music. At night, when his grandmother was at work cleaning offices, he would lie on his sleeping mat and remember every note he had heard that day. He would move his fingers in the air, pretending to press the piano keys. He started to understand which finger movements made which sounds. One day, Kofi found a large piece of cardboard thrown away behind the shop where they lived. The cardboard was flat and clean on one side. He took it up to their room and, using a pencil he had found on the street, he drew lines on the cardboard. Then he drew rectangles to look like piano keys. He made some keys bigger and colored them white with chalk he borrowed from a child at school. He made other keys smaller and colored them black with charcoal from a cooking fire. Now Kofi had his own piano. It was not real and it made no sound, but he could practice on it. Every evening he would put his cardboard piano on the floor and press the keys he had drawn. He would remember the songs from the cafe and try to play them on his silent piano. His fingers got better at finding the right keys. He learned to move his hands without looking at them. The cardboard piano became Kofi's most important thing. He hid it under his sleeping mat during the day so his grandmother would not see it. He knew she would think it was silly and that he was wasting time. But at night, when she was gone, he would take out his piano and play for hours. Sometimes, other children from the neighborhood would see him through the window. They would point and laugh. "Look at Kofi playing his pretend piano," they would say. "He thinks he is a musician, but he is just a poor boy with no father or mother." Their words hurt Kofi, but he did not stop playing his cardboard piano. Something inside him knew that this was what he was meant to do. The music felt like the most natural thing in the world. When his fingers moved on the cardboard keys, he felt happy and complete. He felt like he was talking to God in a language that had no words. Weeks passed and Kofi got better and better at playing his cardboard piano. He could play entire songs from memory. He started to make up his own songs too. He would think about his parents and create music that sounded like missing them. He would think about his grandmother working so hard and create music that sounded like love and worry mixed together. But even though he was getting better, Kofi knew that his cardboard piano was not enough. He needed to touch real keys. He needed to hear the actual sounds his fingers could make. Every day when he walked past the cafe and saw the real piano, his heart would hurt with wanting. He would press his face against the window and watch the piano man's fingers memorizing every movement. The wanting grew stronger and stronger inside Kofi until it felt like it might burst out of him. He started to dream about playing the real piano. He would wake up thinking he had been making real music, only to remember it was just a dream. The cardboard piano, which had made him so happy before, now made him feel sad because it reminded him of what he could not have. One morning, as he got ready to go buy bread, Kofi made a decision that would change his life forever. Today would be different. Today he would not just walk past the cafe and listen. Today he would be brave. Today he would ask. Thursday started like every other day, but something felt different in Kofi's chest. He woke up before his grandmother came home from her night job. The sun was just starting to come through the small window of their room. He lay on his sleeping mat and listened to the sounds of the city waking up. Cars were starting to drive on the streets. People were beginning to talk and walk around. But all Kofi could think about was the piano at the cafe. His grandmother came home just as Kofi was getting ready for school. She looked very tired, like she always did after working all night. Her eyes were red and her back was bent from bending over to clean floors and empty trash cans. She gave Kofi his money for bread and told him to be careful walking to school. "Yes, Grandmama," Kofi said, putting the coins in his pocket. But even as he said the words, he knew today would not be a normal day. At school, Kofi could not think about his lessons. His teacher, Mr. Asante, was talking about mathematics, but Kofi's mind was full of music. He kept seeing the piano player's fingers in his head. He kept hearing the songs that the three men played together. His own fingers moved under his desk, pressing invisible keys. "Kofi," Mr. Asante said loudly, "are you listening to me?" "Yes, sir," Kofi said quickly, but he knew his face was red with embarrassment. Some of the other children laughed at him. "Then tell me what 7 times 8 equals," the teacher said. Kofi had not been listening at all. He did not know the answer. I do not know, sir," he said quietly. Mr. Asante shook his head. "You must pay attention, Kofi. Education is the only way to make a better life for yourself." Kofi nodded, but inside he was thinking that maybe music could also make a better life. Maybe music was his education. Maybe the piano was calling to him for a reason. When school ended, Kofi walked slowly toward the bread shop. He had the money his grandmother gave him in his pocket, but his feet did not want to go to the bread shop. His feet wanted to go to the cafe. His heart was beating fast like it did when he ran. But he was not running. He was just walking and thinking about what he wanted to do. The closer he got to the cafe, the more nervous he became. What would he say to the piano man? What if the man said no? What if the man got angry at him for asking? What if the other people at the cafe laughed at him? Kofi was just a poor boy with no shoes and clothes that had holes in them. Why would anyone let him touch such a beautiful piano? But then Kofi remembered something his mother used to tell him before she died. She used to say, "Kofi, my son, God gives every person special gifts. Your gift is in your heart, but you must be brave enough to share it with the world." At the time, Kofi had not understood what she meant. He was only a small child then. But now, standing near the cafe with his heart beating so fast, he thought, maybe he understood. Maybe his gift was music. Maybe God had put music in his heart and now he needed to be brave enough to let it out. Kofi could hear the music starting. It was 2 o'clock, just like every day. The piano man was sitting at his piano. The saxophone man was sitting next to him. The drum man was behind his drums. They were starting to play a song that Kofi knew very well because he had practiced it many times on his cardboard piano. People were sitting at the tables outside the cafe. They were drinking coffee and eating food and talking to each other. Most of them were not really listening to the music, just like always. This made Kofi feel a little angry. How could they not listen when something so beautiful was happening right next to them? Kofi walked closer to the cafe. His hands were shaking and his mouth felt dry. He stood behind a tree and watched the piano man play. The man's fingers moved so smoothly on the keys. They knew exactly where to go. Each finger seemed to have its own job, and they all worked together to make the most wonderful sounds. The song they were playing was slow and sad, but also hopeful. It made Kofi think of flowers growing in a field after a long dry time. It made him think of his parents watching him from heaven and smiling. It made him think of all the music that was inside him, waiting to come out. When the song ended, people clapped politely. Then the three musicians started to play another song, this one faster and more happy. Kofi found himself moving his feet to the rhythm. His body wanted to dance, but he held still behind the tree. After they played for about 30 minutes, the piano man stood up and walked away from the piano. The saxophone man and the drum man also got up. This was their break time. Kofi knew because he had watched them many times before. Usually, the piano man would go inside the cafe and buy coffee. The saxophone man would walk around and stretch his legs. The drum man would sit at one of the tables and drink water. Today, the saxophone man and the drum man sat down at a table together. They were talking in English, which Kofi understood a little bit because he learned some English in school. The piano man had gone inside, just like always. This was Kofi's chance. His heart was beating so loud he was sure everyone could hear it. His hands were shaking so much he had to hold them together to make them stop, but he knew that if he did not do this now, he might never be brave enough to do it again. Kofi walked out from behind the tree. He walked slowly toward the table where the saxophone man and drum man were sitting. With each step, he felt more scared, but he also felt more sure that this was what he had to do. The saxophone man looked up as Kofi got closer. He had kind eyes, but he also looked confused. Probably he was wondering why a young boy in old clothes was walking toward their table. "Hello," Kofi said quietly in English. His voice sounded shaky and small. "Hello there," the saxophone man said, back. He had a nice smile. "How are you today?" I am fine, sir," Kofi said. He was so nervous he could barely remember the English words he wanted to use. The drum man also smiled at him. "What's your name, young man?" he asked. His accent was different from the saxophone man's accent. Later, Kofi would learn that the saxophone man was from America and the drum man was from England. But right now, he just knew they sounded different from each other and different from everyone else he knew. "My name is Kofi, sir," he said. "That's a nice name," the saxophone man said. "I'm Marcus, and this is James." "Hello, Marcus." "Hello, James," Kofi said politely, the way his grandmother had taught him to greet adults. The two men waited for Kofi to say something else. Kofi knew they were being patient with him, but he also knew they were probably wondering what he wanted. His mouth felt so dry he could barely swallow. His hands were shaking again. But he had come this far, and he had to say what he came to say. "Sir," Kofi said to Marcus, looking at the saxophone man because he seemed the friendest. "I have a question to ask you." "Sure," Marcus said. "What's your question?" Kofi took a deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything, though he did not know that yet. "Please, sir," he said, his voice very quiet and nervous. Can I touch the piano?" Marcus and James looked at each other with surprised faces. This was clearly not what they had expected him to ask. "You want to touch the piano?" James asked. "Yes, sir," Kofi said. I think maybe I can play it." Marcus and James stared at Kofi with wide eyes. The boy could see they were surprised by his question. Maybe they thought he was joking, or maybe they thought he was crazy. Kofi felt his face getting hot with embarrassment, but he did not look away. He had been brave enough to ask the question, so now he had to be brave enough to wait for their answer. "You think you can play the piano?" Marcus asked again, like he wanted to make sure he heard correctly. "Yes, sir," Kofi said, though his voice was barely louder than a whisper. "I have been listening to you play every day for many months. I have been learning." James laughed, but it was not a mean laugh. It was more like he was confused and surprised. "Learning how?" he asked. "Do you take piano lessons?" Kofi shook his head. "No, sir. My grandmother and we do not have money for lessons, but I made a piano from cardboard, and I practice every night." Now both men looked even more surprised. Marcus leaned forward in his chair. "You made a piano from cardboard?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Kofi said. "I drew the keys on cardboard, and I practiced the songs I hear you play. My fingers know where to go." Before Marcus or James could say anything else, another voice joined the conversation. "What is this boy doing here?" The voice belonged to Mr. Mensah, the man who owned the cafe. He had come outside when he saw Kofi talking to his musicians. Mr. Mensah was a big man with a round belly and a serious face. He did not look happy to see Kofi standing near his expensive piano. "You should not be bothering these men," he said, to Kofi in their local language, Twi. "They are here to work, not to talk to street children." "I am sorry, sir," Kofi said quickly, also in Twi. "I did not mean to cause trouble." "What's he saying?" Marcus asked Mr. Mensah. "I am telling him to go away," Mr. Mensah said in English. "He is just a poor boy from the neighborhood. He probably wants money or food." "Actually," James said, "he was asking if he could play the piano." Mr. Mensah laughed, but his laugh was not kind like James's laugh had been. "Play the piano? This child?" He looked at Kofi's old clothes and bare feet. He has probably never even seen a real piano before. "I have seen it," Kofi said quietly in English, trying to be respectful but also trying to defend himself. "I see it every day. I listen every day." "Listen," Mr. Mensah said, still speaking to Marcus and James but pointing at Kofi. "These children, they are always trying tricks to get something. Maybe he wants to steal something, or maybe he wants you to give him money. You should not trust him." Kofi felt tears starting to come to his eyes. He had not thought about this. He had not thought that people would think he was trying to steal or trick anyone. He just wanted to play music. He just wanted to touch the real keys and hear the real sounds his fingers could make. "I do not want money," Kofi said, his voice getting a little louder because he felt hurt by what Mr. Mensah was saying. "I do not want to steal anything. I just want to play music." Some people at the nearby tables had started to notice the conversation. They were looking over at Kofi and the three men. Some of them were whispering to each other. Kofi felt embarrassed that so many people were looking at him, but he also felt angry that they thought bad things about him just because his clothes were old and his feet were bare. "The piano is very expensive," Mr. Mensah continued, speaking to Marcus and James. "If he breaks something, who will pay for it? His family has no money. Look at him." Marcus looked at Kofi for a long moment. The boy could see that the saxophone man was thinking hard about what to do. James was also looking at Kofi, and his face seemed kinder than Mr. Mensah's face. "Where did you learn English?" Marcus asked Kofi. "In school, sir. Kofi answered. And from listening to you and James talk every day. You understand what we say when we talk? James asked. Some of it, sir. Not all, but some. Marcus and James looked at each other again. Kofi could tell they were having a silent conversation with their eyes, the way his parents used to do when they were deciding something important. Listen, Mr. Mensah said, his voice getting more impatient. I need to get back to work, and you two need to get ready for your next set. Send this boy away so we can continue. But Marcus held up his hand to stop Mr. Mensah from talking. Wait, he said. Let me ask you something, son. He looked directly at Kofi. What's your favorite song that we play? Kofi thought for a moment. There were so many songs he loved, but one came to his mind immediately. The slow one that sounds like crying, but also like hoping, he said. You play it almost every day, usually near the end. Marcus's eyes got wide. Amazing Grace? He asked. I do not know the name, Kofi said. But it makes me think of my mother and father who died. Can you sing it? James asked. Kofi was so nervous he thought he might be sick, but he opened his mouth and began to hum the melody of Amazing Grace. His voice was quiet and shaky, but he got the tune right. He had heard it so many times that it was inside his head perfectly. When he finished humming, there was silence. Marcus and James stared at him with their mouths open a little bit. Even Mr. Mensah looked surprised. That's exactly right, Marcus said softly. Every note. How long have you been listening to us? James asked. Every day since I came to live with my grandmother, Kofi said. 6 months, maybe 7 months. And you've been practicing on a cardboard piano? Yes, sir. Marcus stood up from his chair. He looked at Mr. Mensah. I want to let him try, he said. Absolutely not, Mr. Mensah said immediately. That piano costs more money than this boy's family will see in their whole lives. If he damages it, I'll take full responsibility, Marcus said. If anything happens to the piano, I'll pay for it myself. Marcus, James said quietly. Are you sure about this? Marcus looked at Kofi again. The boy felt like the saxophone. Man was looking right into his heart, trying to see if he was telling the truth about knowing how to play. There's something about him, Marcus said. Did you hear how he hummed that melody? Perfect pitch, perfect rhythm. And look at his hands. James looked at Kofi's hands. They were small and thin, but his fingers were long for his age. They were the kind of hands that looked like they were made for playing piano. One song, Marcus said to Mr. Mensah. Let him play one song. If he can't play, then we'll know, and he'll leave. If he can play... Marcus stopped talking and shrugged his shoulders. If he can play what? Mr. Mensah asked. Then we'll figure out what to do next, Marcus said. Kofi's heart was beating so fast he thought it might jump out of his chest. They were actually considering letting him play the real piano. The piano he had dreamed about touching for so many months. The piano that made the beautiful music he loved so much. Please, Mr. Mensah, Kofi said in Twi. I promise I will be very careful. I promise I will not break anything. I just want to touch the keys one time. Mr. Mensah looked around at all the people who were now watching and listening to their conversation. Some of the customers seemed curious about what would happen. Others looked annoyed that their quiet coffee time was being interrupted by drama. Finally, Mr. Mensah sighed a big sigh. One song, he said. One song only. If you break anything, this man Marcus will pay for it. But you will never come back to my cafe again. Do you understand? Yes, sir, Kofi said. I understand. Marcus smiled at Kofi. Okay, son, he said. Let's see what you can do. Kofi walked toward the piano like he was walking in a dream. His legs felt weak and shaky, but somehow they carried him forward. The piano looked even more beautiful up close than it did from far away. The black and white keys seemed to shine in the afternoon sun. The wood was polished and smooth. This was the most expensive and beautiful thing Kofi had ever been allowed to touch. Behind him, he could hear people talking quietly. Some of the cafe customers had turned their chairs to watch what was happening. A few people walking on the street had stopped to see why there was a crowd gathering. Kofi tried not to think about all the people looking at him. He tried to focus only on the piano. Marcus walked with him to the piano bench. "Go ahead and sit down," he said gently. "Take your time." Kofi sat on the bench and his feet did not touch the ground. He was smaller than the man who usually played this piano. The bench felt soft under him, much more comfortable than the hard floor where he usually sat with his cardboard piano. He put his hands in his lap and stared at the keys. "Are you okay?" James asked. He had followed them to the piano and was standing nearby with his arms crossed. "I think so," Kofi said, but his voice was so quiet that James had to lean forward to hear him. "There's no pressure," Marcus said. "If you're too nervous or if you change your mind, that's okay too." But Kofi did not want to change his mind. He had dreamed of this moment for so many months. He had practiced for hours every night on his cardboard piano, imagining what it would feel like to touch real keys and hear real music come from his fingers. Now the moment was finally here. He lifted his hands and held them over the keys. They were shaking so much he had to take several deep breaths to try to make them steady. He could feel his heart beating in his chest and in his ears. Everything around him seemed very quiet, like the whole world was waiting to hear what he would do. "What song are you going to play?" Marcus asked softly. "Amazing Grace," Kofi whispered. "The one I hummed for you. That's a good choice," Marcus said. "It's a beautiful song." Kofi nodded, but he still had not touched the keys. He was afraid that when he pressed them, no music would come out. Or worse, he was afraid that terrible sounds would come out and everyone would laugh at him. What if all his practicing on the cardboard piano had been wrong? What if he did not really know how to play at all? "Hey," James said, and his voice was very kind. "Do you know what I was thinking about when I was your age?" Kofi looked up at him. "I was thinking about playing drums," James continued, "but I was too scared to try because I thought people would think I was not good enough. You know what I wish now?" "What?" Kofi asked. "I wish I had been brave like you are being right now. I wish I had asked someone to let me try." Kofi looked back at the piano keys. Maybe James was right. Maybe being here, being brave enough to ask, was already something special. Even if he could not play well, at least he had tried. He placed his fingers on the keys, just resting them there without pressing down. The keys felt smooth and cool under his fingertips. They felt different from the cardboard keys he was used to. These were real. These would make real sounds. Slowly, very slowly, Kofi pressed down on the first key. A clear, beautiful note rang out into the air. It was the most wonderful sound he had ever made. He pressed another key, then another. Each note was perfect and clear and exactly what he had imagined in his mind when he practiced on his cardboard piano. He began to play Amazing Grace, starting with the simple melody just like he had practiced so many times. His fingers remembered where to go. They moved from key to key like they had been doing this for years instead of doing it for the first time. The music that came out of the piano was exactly like the music he heard in his head when he played his cardboard piano at home. But something amazing started to happen as Kofi played. The music began to sound different from the way Marcus usually played it. Kofi's version had a different feeling to it. Where Marcus played it smooth and gentle, Kofi played it with a rhythm that came from somewhere deep inside him. It sounded like African music and church music and jazz music all mixed together in a way that was completely his own. The people watching began to realize that something special was happening. The conversation stopped. Even the people inside. The cafe came outside to listen. Kofi did not notice any of this because he was lost in the music. For the first time in his life, he was making real music with real instruments, and it felt like flying. As he played, Kofi began to add things to the song that he had never practiced. His right hand played the melody, but his left hand began to add low notes that sounded like a heartbeat. Then his right hand began to add extra notes between the main melody notes, making the song more interesting and more complicated. Marcus stood with his mouth open, watching Kofi's fingers dance across the keys. This was not just a boy who had memorized a song. This was a boy who understood music from the inside. This was a boy who had natural talent that Marcus had only seen a few times in his life. James was equally amazed. He had grown up around music his whole life. His father was a famous musician in England, James knew good music when he heard it, and what this 12-year-old boy was playing was very, very good. As Kofi reached the end of the song, he did something that made everyone gasp. Instead of ending the song the way it usually ended, he began to play it again. But this time he played it like jazz music. He took the simple church song and turned it into something that swung and danced. His left hand played a walking bass line while his right hand played the melody with twists and turns that sounded like they came from a master musician. The people watching began to smile and nod their heads to the rhythm. Some of them started to clap along quietly. A few people took out their phones and started recording what they were seeing and hearing. Kofi played for almost 5 minutes, turning the simple song into a complex and beautiful piece of music that told a story. The story was about being sad but also hopeful. It was about missing people you love but also believing that everything would be okay in the end. It was about being small and poor but having something beautiful inside you that no one could take away. When he finally finished, Kofi sat very still for a moment with his hands resting on the keys. He was breathing hard, like he had been running. He felt tired but also more alive than he had ever felt in his life. He had done it. He had played real music on a real piano, and it had been even more wonderful than he had dreamed. The silence lasted for what felt like forever, but was probably only a few seconds. Then someone started clapping. Then another person joined in. Then everyone was clapping and cheering. Some people were standing up. Some people were crying. Everyone was looking at Kofi with amazement and joy. Kofi turned around on the piano bench and looked at all the people. He could not believe they were clapping for him. He could not believe that he, a poor boy with no shoes and old clothes, had made music that made people happy. He looked at Marcus and James. Both men had tears in their eyes. "Son," Marcus said, and his voice was shaky with emotion. "Where did you learn to play like that?" "I told you," Kofi said, "from listening to you and practicing on my cardboard piano." "No," Marcus said, shaking his head. "That's not possible. What you just did, that takes years of training. That takes natural talent that most people don't have." James was nodding his head in agreement. "That was incredible," he said. "I've never heard anything like it." Mr. Mensah, the cafe owner, walked over to where they were standing. Kofi was afraid he might be angry, but instead Mr. Mensah had a big smile on his face. "Young man," he said to Kofi, "I owe you an apology. I thought you were just a troublemaker, but you are clearly something very special." Kofi did not know what to say. He felt overwhelmed by all the attention and all the kind words. Part of him wanted to run home to his grandmother and tell her everything that had happened. But another part of him wanted to stay right here at the piano forever and never stop playing. The clapping continued for what felt like hours but was probably only a few minutes. Kofi sat on the piano bench, turning his head to look at all the people who were smiling and cheering for him. He had never had so many people looking at him, with happy faces before. Usually when people looked at him, they either ignored him or looked at him with pity because of his old clothes and bare feet. But now they were looking at him like he was someone important. "Play another song," someone shouted from the crowd. "Yes, play more," called another person. Kofi looked at Marcus and James, not sure what he should do. This was supposed to be just one song, just one chance to touch the piano. But the people seemed to want to hear more music. "What do you think?" Marcus asked him. "Do you know any other songs?" Kofi nodded. "I know many songs," he said. "All the songs you play, I have been practicing them." "Show us," James said with a big smile on his face. Kofi turned back to the piano and placed his hands on the keys again. This time he did not feel as nervous. The first song had gone well, so maybe the second song would go well too. He began to play a jazz song that Marcus often played, but again, Kofi played it in his own special way. While Kofi played his second song, something wonderful happened. Marcus went and got his saxophone, and James sat down at his drums. They began to play along with Kofi, following his lead instead of him following theirs. It was like they had been playing together for years instead of for the first time. The music that the three of them made together was magical. Kofi's piano playing was full of rhythm and soul. Marcus's saxophone sang along with the piano melody. James's drums kept everything together with beats that made people want to dance. The cafe became alive with music in a way it had never been before. More and more people stopped to listen. The small crowd that had been watching when Kofi played his first song grew bigger and bigger. People walking down the street heard the music and came to see what was happening. People in nearby shops came outside to listen. Even some people, driving cars, stopped and got out to hear the music. When they finished the second song, the crowd was even bigger and the clapping was even louder. Kofi looked around at all the faces and felt something he had never felt before. He felt proud of himself. He felt like he belonged somewhere. He felt like he was good at something important. "This is unbelievable," said a woman in the crowd. She had a nice camera and had been taking pictures of Kofi while he played. "This boy is incredibly talented." "How old is he?" asked a man standing next to her. "I'm 12, Kofi said, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. 12 years old, the woman said, and he plays like he's been doing it his whole life. Marcus walked over to Kofi and put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Kofi," he said, "I need to ask you some questions, okay?" "Okay," Kofi said. "You said you live with your grandmother?" "Yes, sir. My parents died in a car accident, so now I live with my grandmother." "And she works at night?" "Yes, sir. She cleans offices to make money for our food and for the room where we live." Marcus looked sad when he heard this. "Do you go to school?" "Yes, sir. I go to school in the morning and then I come home and do my homework, and then I come here to listen to you play." "Every day?" "Every day except Sunday when you do not play." James came over to join their conversation. "Kofi," he said, "what you just did is very special. Most people cannot play piano like that even after taking lessons for many years." "Really?" Kofi asked. "Really," Marcus said. "I have been playing music for 20 years and I have never heard anyone play like you just played." "What does that mean?" Kofi asked. Marcus and James looked at each other. "It means you have a gift," Marcus said. "God gave you something very special." "My mother used to tell me that God gives everyone special gifts," Kofi said quietly. "But I did not know what my gift was until I heard you playing the piano." "Well, now you know," James said, "and now we know too." The crowd was still standing around talking excitedly about what they had just heard. Some people were taking pictures with their phones. Some people were talking to each other about how amazing it was to see such a young boy play so beautifully. "Can I ask you something else?" Marcus said to Kofi. "Yes, sir. Would you like to learn to play piano properly, with real lessons from a real teacher?" Kofi's eyes got very wide. "Yes, sir," he said. "But my grandmother and I, we do not have money for lessons." "What if I told you that the lessons would be free?" Marcus asked. "Free?" Kofi could not believe what he was hearing. "I am a piano teacher back in America," Marcus said. "I teach music to children and adults. I have been playing with James here in Ghana for 3 months as part of a cultural exchange program, but I have never met a student with natural talent like yours." "What are you saying?" Kofi asked. "I'm saying that I would like to teach you to play piano while I am still here in Ghana. And James here, his father runs a music foundation in England that helps young musicians who cannot afford lessons." James nodded. "It's true," he said. "My father's foundation has helped many young people become professional musicians. I think you could be one of them." Kofi felt like he was dreaming. This morning he had been just a poor boy with a cardboard piano. Now these two kind men were talking about giving him real piano lessons and helping him become a real musician. "There's something else," Marcus said. "Mr. Mensah, can you come here for a minute?" The cafe owner walked over to where they were standing. "What can I do for you?" he asked. "Would you be willing to let Kofi practice on your piano?" Marcus asked. "Maybe early in the morning before you open, or late in the afternoon after we finish playing?" Mr. Mensah looked at Kofi, then looked at the crowd of happy people who were still talking about the amazing music they had just heard. Many of them were customers who had bought extra coffee and food while listening to the music. "You know what?" Mr. Mensah said. "After hearing him play, I think having Kofi practice here might be good for business. People love good music. Yes, he can practice here." Kofi felt tears starting to come to his eyes, but they were happy tears. "Really?" he asked. "I can practice on the real piano?" "Every day," Mr. Mensah said with a smile. You can practice every morning before we open. I will give you a key so you can let yourself in. And I will come every morning to give you lessons, Marcus said. We will work together every day until I have to go back to America. When do you have to go back? Kofi asked. In 3 months, Marcus said. But 3 months is enough time to teach you many important things about music, and James will help us contact music schools and programs that might want to help you continue your education. Kofi looked at James. You will really help me? Absolutely, James said. What you did here today is special. The world needs to hear your music. Just then, a woman in the crowd came up to them. She was the one who had been taking pictures with the nice camera. Excuse me, she said. My name is Sarah and I am a reporter for the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. I would like to write a story about what happened here today. Would that be okay with you? Kofi looked at Marcus and James, not sure what to say. It would be good. For people to know about your talent, Marcus said. Maybe the story will help other people want to support your music education. Okay, Kofi said to the reporter. You can write about me. Wonderful, Sarah said. Can I ask you a few questions? For the next 20 minutes, Kofi answered questions from the reporter, while Marcus and James talked to people in the crowd. Many people wanted to know more about the boy who had played such beautiful music. Some people asked how they could help with his music education. A few people even offered to give money to help pay for his lessons and for better clothes and shoes. As the afternoon went on and the crowd finally began to get smaller, Kofi realized that his life had changed completely in just one day. This morning, he had been afraid to ask if he could touch the piano. Now he had played for a crowd of people, made friends with 2 professional musicians, and been promised real piano lessons. But the most important thing was not the lessons, or the promises, or even the crowd of people who had clapped for him. The most important thing was that he had finally been able to make real music. He had been able to take the music that lived inside his heart and let it out into the world. And when he let it out, it had made people happy. Kofi, Marcus said, as they were getting ready to pack up the instruments, do you have any questions about what happened today? Just one, Kofi said. What is it? When I go home tonight and tell my grandmother about this, do you think she will believe me? Marcus and James laughed when Kofi asked if his grandmother would believe him. Don't worry, Marcus said. We'll make sure she believes you. How? Kofi asked. We're going to come with you to meet her, James said. If that's okay with you. Kofi's eyes got very wide. You want to meet my grandmother? Of course, Marcus said. If we're going to teach you music, we should meet your family. We want to make sure your grandmother is happy about the plan. She will be so surprised, Kofi said. She thinks music is only for people with money. Well, James said, tonight we're going to show her that music is for people with talent, and her grandson has more talent than most people ever dream of having. The reporter, Sarah, had finished writing down all the information she needed for her story. Before she left, she took one more picture of Kofi sitting at the piano with Marcus and James standing beside him. This story will be in tomorrow's newspaper, she told Kofi, and it will be on the radio news tonight. You are going to be famous. Famous? Kofi could not believe it. Yesterday he had been invisible. People walked past him on the street like he was not even there. Now a reporter was telling him he would be famous. Your story is very inspiring, Sarah explained. People love to hear about young people who work hard and have big dreams. When they read about you practicing on a cardboard piano for months, and then playing so beautifully today, it will make them feel hopeful. After Sarah left, Marcus and James helped Mr. Mensah put away the instruments and clean up the cafe. Kofi watched everything they did, trying to learn how to take care of musical instruments properly. Tomorrow morning, Mr. Mensah told Kofi, you come here at 7 o'clock. I will show you how to open the cafe and how to turn on the lights. Then you can practice for 1 hour before we open for business. Thank you so much, Mr. Mensah, Kofi said. I promise I will take very good care of your piano. I know you will, Mr. Mensah said with a smile. Anyone who plays with such love and respect for music will also have love and respect for instruments. When everything was cleaned up, Marcus and James walked with Kofi toward the small room where he lived with his grandmother. Along the way, they talked about music and about what Kofi would learn in his lessons. "The first thing I want to teach you," Marcus said, "is how to read music notes on paper. You already play by ear, which is wonderful. But if you can also read music, you will be able to learn new songs much faster." "What does play by ear mean?" Kofi asked. "It means you can hear music and then play it without needing to see it written down," James explained. "It's a very special skill. Many musicians never learn how to do it." "I can do that because I listened to you play the same songs every day for months," Kofi said. "I heard them so many times that they became part of me." "That's exactly right," Marcus said. "But now we're going to teach you songs you've never heard before and show you how to make your own songs too." "I can make my own songs?" Kofi asked. "Of course. The music you played today was not exactly the same as how I usually play those songs. You added your own style to them. That means you already know how to make music your own way." They walked through the narrow streets where Kofi lived. The houses were small and close together. Many families lived in just 1 or 2 rooms. Children played in the dusty streets with balls made of rags and toys made from bottle caps and sticks. This was a poor neighborhood, but it was full of life and laughter. "Is that where you live?" James asked, pointing to a small building with a shop on the bottom floor and rooms on the second floor. "Yes," Kofi said. "My grandmother and I live in one room upstairs. The woman who owns the shop lets us live there because my grandmother helps clean the shop every evening." Marcus and James followed Kofi up a narrow staircase to the second floor. Kofi knocked on a wooden door. "Grandmama?" he called. "I'm home, and I have visitors." From inside the room came the sound of footsteps, and then the door opened. Kofi's grandmother was a small, thin woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She looked tired from her night of work, but when she saw the 2 strange men with her grandson, she became alert and worried. "Kofi," she said in Twi, "who are these men? What have you done?" "Grandmama," Kofi said also in Twi, "these are my friends Marcus and James. They are the musicians from the cafe. They came to talk to you about something wonderful that happened today." Kofi's grandmother looked confused. She invited them into the small room, which had just enough space for 2 sleeping mats on the floor, a small table, and a few pots for cooking. The room was very clean but very simple. "Do you speak English?" Marcus asked Kofi's grandmother politely. "A little," she said carefully. "My name is Marcus, and this is James. We play music at the cafe where Kofi likes to listen to us." "Yes," she said. "Every day he goes there. I tell him not to bother the people, but he says he just likes to hear the music." "Ma'am," James said gently, "your grandson is very special. Today he played piano for us, and he is incredibly talented." Kofi's grandmother looked at her grandson with surprise. "You played piano?" she asked him in Twi. "Yes, Grandmama," Kofi said. "I asked them if I could touch the piano and they let me play. I played the songs I learned on my cardboard piano." "Your cardboard piano?" she asked. Kofi went to his sleeping mat and pulled out the piece of cardboard with the piano keys drawn on it. He showed it to Marcus and James, and then to his grandmother. "This is what I have been practicing on every night when you are at work," he explained to her. His grandmother stared at the cardboard piano. She had known that Kofi was doing something when she was gone, but she had not known what. She had sometimes heard him humming and moving around, but she had not realized he was trying to learn music. "Show her," Marcus said to Kofi. "Play something on your cardboard piano so she can see how you practice." Kofi sat on the floor with his cardboard piano and began to move his fingers on the drawn keys. He hummed the melody of Amazing Grace while his hands moved in exactly the same way they had moved on the real piano earlier that day. His grandmother watched with amazement. She could see that Kofi's fingers knew exactly where to go. She could see that he was not just playing around, he was really making music, even though the cardboard made no sound. "And today," Marcus said, "he played this same song on a real piano, and it was the most beautiful thing we have ever heard." "Really?" Kofi's grandmother asked. "Really," James said. "So beautiful that a crowd of people gathered to listen. So beautiful that a newspaper reporter wants to write about him. So beautiful that we want to give him free piano lessons every day. Free lessons, she asked. Yes, ma'am, Marcus said. Your grandson has a gift from God. It would be wrong for us not to help him develop that gift. Kofi's grandmother sat down on her sleeping mat and looked at her grandson. You really played piano today? Real piano? Yes, Grandmama, Kofi said. And tomorrow morning Mr. Mensah is going to let me practice on his piano every day. And Marcus is going to teach me how to read music notes. And James is going to help me find ways to study music properly. His grandmother began to cry, but they were happy tears. Your mother always said you had something special inside you, she said. But we were so poor. I thought we would never be able to help you find it. Well, Marcus said, now we're going to help him find it together. They talked for another hour about the plan for Kofi's music education. Marcus explained that he would teach Kofi every morning for 3 months before he had to return to America. James explained that his father's foundation could possibly help Kofi continue his studies even after Marcus left. There's something else, James said. We want to make a video recording of Kofi playing, so we can show it to music schools and foundations that might want to help him. What kind of help? Kofi's grandmother asked. Maybe a scholarship to a good music school, Marcus explained. Maybe help paying for a piano of his own. Maybe even the chance to study music in other countries someday. Other countries? Kofi asked. If you keep working hard and learning, James said, there's no limit to how far your music could take you. When Marcus and James finally got ready to leave, Kofi's grandmother shook their hands and thanked them many times. You have given my grandson hope, she said. You have given both of us hope. No, ma'am, Marcus said. Your grandson gave us hope. Today, when we heard him play, it reminded us why we love music so much. It reminded us that music is not just about entertainment. Music is about the human soul expressing itself. After they left, Kofi and his grandmother sat together on her sleeping mat and talked about everything that had happened. Are you sure this is not a dream? She asked him. I think it might be a dream, Kofi said. But if it is a dream, I don't want to wake up. His grandmother hugged him tightly. Tomorrow, she said, you will start a new life. Tomorrow you will start becoming the musician you were born to be. Kofi woke up the next morning before the sun came up, just like every day. But this morning felt completely different from every other morning of his life. For a few seconds, lying on his sleeping mat in the dark, he wondered if everything that happened yesterday had been a dream. Then he saw his cardboard piano leaning against the wall and he remembered that it was all real. Today, he would not need his cardboard piano. Today, he would practice on a real piano. His grandmother was already awake, getting ready for bed after her night of work cleaning offices. She looked at Kofi with a big smile on her tired face. Are you ready for your first real piano lesson? She asked. I think so, Kofi said, but his stomach felt full of butterflies. What if I cannot play as well today as I played yesterday? What if it was just luck? It was not luck, his grandmother said. It was months and months of practice and years of music living in your heart. Today will be even better than yesterday. She had prepared a special breakfast for Kofi, bread with butter and jam, instead of just plain bread like usual. This is to celebrate your new beginning, she said. While Kofi ate his breakfast, there was a knock at the door. His grandmother opened it, and there stood a man Kofi had never seen before. Good morning, the man said. I am looking for the young piano player. I heard him on the radio news last night. The radio? Kofi asked. Yes, the man said. The story about you was on the radio news. My name is Dr. Osei, and I am a music teacher at the University of Ghana. I came to meet you and to hear you play. Kofi looked at his grandmother with wide eyes. He was going to be late for his lesson with Marcus if he talked to this man for too long. Sir, Kofi said politely, I am very honored to meet you, but I have to go to my piano lesson now. Could you come to the cafe later today to hear me practice? Dr. Osei smiled. A boy who puts practice before attention, he said. That is a very good sign. Yes, I will come to the cafe this afternoon. Kofi said goodbye to his grandmother and ran through the streets toward the cafe. He had never been to the cafe so early in the morning. The streets were quieter than usual, with just a few people walking to work or to market. The air was cooler and fresher than it would be later in the day. When he got to the cafe, he found Mr. Mensah waiting for him with a big smile and a key in his hand. "Here you are," Mr. Mensah said. "Your key to the cafe. This makes you very special, you know. I have never given a key to anyone except my family. Thank you, Mr. Mensah," Kofi said, taking the key carefully. "I will take very good care of it." Mr. Mensah showed Kofi how to unlock the door, how to turn on the lights, and how to open the curtains to let in the morning light. Then he showed him where to find water if he got thirsty, and where to find a cloth if he needed to clean the piano keys. "The piano is yours for 1 hour every morning," Mr. Mensah said. "From 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Marcus will come at 7:30 to give you your lesson." When Mr. Mensah left, Kofi found himself alone with the piano for the first time. Yesterday there had been crowds of people watching him. Now it was just him and the instrument and the quiet morning light coming through the windows. He sat down at the piano bench and placed his hands on the keys. Just like yesterday, the keys felt smooth and cool under his fingers. But today he was not nervous. Today he felt like he was coming home. He began to play Amazing Grace, the same song he had played yesterday. But today, it sounded even better. He was more relaxed, and his fingers moved more confidently. He played the song through once the way he had learned it on his cardboard piano, and then he began to experiment with it, adding new notes and new rhythms. At exactly 7:30, Marcus arrived. He stood in the doorway listening to Kofi play with a huge smile on his face. "Good morning, Maestro," Marcus said. "What is Maestro?" Kofi asked. "It's what we call a very skilled musician," Marcus said. "And after hearing you play just now, I think you deserve the title." For the next 30 minutes, Marcus taught Kofi how to read musical notes written on paper. He showed him how the lines and spaces on the staff corresponded to different keys on the piano. He showed him how to read the symbols that told him how long to hold each note. "This is like learning a new language," Marcus explained. "Right now, you speak the language of music with your ears and your fingers. But when you can read music notation, you'll be able to speak the language with your eyes too." Kofi was amazed at how quickly he understood the written music. Within just 30 minutes, he was able to read simple songs that Marcus wrote out for him. "You're learning this faster than any student I've ever had," Marcus said. "Most people take weeks to learn what you just learned in half an hour." When their lesson was over, James arrived at the cafe. He had brought a video camera with him. "Good morning, Kofi," James said. "Are you ready to make your first professional recording?" "Professional recording?" Kofi asked. "This video will show the world how talented you are," James explained. "We're going to send it to music schools and foundations all over the world." James set up his camera while Kofi practiced a little more. He wanted to make sure he played his best for the recording. While he practiced, other people began to arrive at the cafe. Word had spread about the amazing piano boy, and people were coming earlier than usual just to hear him play. "Look," Marcus said, pointing to the people gathering outside. "You have fans already." When James was ready with his camera, Kofi played 3 songs for the recording. He played Amazing Grace the way he had played it the day before. Then he played a jazz song that Marcus had taught him. Finally, he played a song that he made up on the spot, using ideas from traditional Ghanaian music mixed with the jazz techniques he was learning. The people watching clapped after each song, but they were careful to stay quiet while he was playing so the recording would be clear. "Perfect," James said when they finished. "This video is going to change your life, Kofi." Throughout the day, more and more people came to the cafe just to see Kofi. Dr. Osei, the university music teacher, came back in the afternoon and listened to Kofi practice. After hearing him play, Dr. Osei offered to give Kofi advanced music theory lessons twice a week. A woman who owned a music store in the city came and offered to let Kofi try different instruments to see if he had talent for anything besides piano. A man who organized concerts offered to let Kofi perform in a real concert hall, but the most exciting visitor came late in the afternoon. A woman in a nice dress and professional shoes walked into the cafe and asked to speak to Kofi. "My name is Mrs. Appiah," she said. "I work for the Ghana Music Foundation. We give scholarships to young musicians who show exceptional talent." "What kind of scholarships?" Marcus asked. "Full scholarships to the best music schools in Ghana," Mrs. Appiah said. "And for truly exceptional students, scholarships to study music in Europe or America." Kofi felt dizzy hearing these words. Yesterday, his biggest dream had been to touch a real piano. Now people were talking about sending him to music schools in other countries. "I would like to arrange for Kofi to audition for our scholarship program," Mrs. Appiah continued. "The audition would be in front of a panel of professional musicians and music teachers." "When?" Kofi asked. "Next month," she said. "That gives you time to prepare with Marcus, and it gives us time to arrange everything properly." When Mrs. Appiah left, Marcus, James, and Kofi sat together at one of the cafe tables and talked about everything that had happened in just 2 days. "Your life is changing very quickly," Marcus said. "How do you feel about all of this?" "Scared," Kofi said honestly, "but also very excited. I never imagined that people would care so much about my music." "People care about your music because it's real," James said. "When you play, people can feel that the music is coming from somewhere deep inside you. That's very rare and very precious." "What if I disappoint them?" Kofi asked. "You won't," Marcus said. "Do you know why I'm sure of that?" "Why?" "Because you're not playing for them. You're playing for the music itself. You're playing because you love it, not because you want people to think you're special. As long as you remember that, you'll never disappoint anyone." That evening, when Kofi walked home, he saw something that made him stop in the middle of the street. Posted on a wall was a newspaper with his picture on the front page. The headline read, "12-year-old piano prodigy amazes Accra." Kofi bought the newspaper with coins his grandmother had given him for emergencies. He ran home as fast as he could to show it to her. "Grandmama," he called as he ran up the stairs. "Look, my picture is in the newspaper." His grandmother looked at the newspaper and began to cry happy tears. "I cannot read English very well," she said, "but I can see that they think you are very special." Kofi read the article out loud to her. It told the whole story of how he had practiced on a cardboard piano and then surprised everyone by playing beautifully at the cafe. It quoted Marcus and James saying that Kofi was the most naturally talented young musician they had ever met. "And look," Kofi said, pointing to a part of the article, "it says that people who want to help support my music education can contact the newspaper." "People want to help us?" his grandmother asked. "People want to help me learn music," Kofi said. "But Grandmama, you are part of this too. Without you working so hard to take care of me, I never could have had time to practice and dream about music." 6 months had passed since that magical Thursday when Kofi first touched the real piano at Mr. Mensah's cafe. Now, on a warm Saturday evening in March, Kofi stood backstage at the Ghana National Theatre, wearing his first real concert clothes. The black pants and white shirt had been a gift from Mrs. Appiah and the Ghana Music Foundation. His new black shoes, the first real shoes he had ever owned, were shiny and comfortable. His grandmother sat in the front row of the big theater, wearing a new dress that James had bought for her with money donated by people who had read about Kofi in the newspapers. She had tears in her eyes as she watched her grandson prepare to perform with the Accra Symphony Youth Orchestra. The past 6 months had been like living in a wonderful dream that kept getting better and better. Marcus had taught Kofi every morning until it was time for him to return to America. Before leaving, Marcus had arranged for Dr. Osei to continue Kofi's lessons. Dr. Osei was amazed at how quickly Kofi learned everything he was taught. "This boy learns music the way other children learn to walk," Dr. Osei told everyone. "It is so natural for him that he doesn't even realize how special it is." James had kept his promise too. His father's foundation in England had not only given Kofi a full scholarship for advanced music training, but they had also arranged for famous music teachers from around the world to work with him through video calls on a computer. The video that James had recorded of Kofi playing had been shared on the internet, where millions of people around the world had watched it. Comments poured in from musicians, teachers, and music lovers from every continent, all saying the same thing. This boy was extraordinarily gifted. A music company in America had even offered to record Kofi playing his music and sell it in stores around the world. The money from these recordings would pay for Kofi's education and help his grandmother stop working so hard. But the most wonderful change was that Kofi now had a real piano of his own. It had been donated by a wealthy businessman in Accra who heard Kofi play and wanted to support his music education. The piano was delivered to a small house that the Ghana Music Foundation had rented for Kofi and his grandmother to live in. For the first time in his life, Kofi had his own room, and in that room sat a beautiful piano where he could practice anytime he wanted. The cardboard piano that had started everything was now hanging on the wall of their new house in a frame, like a painting. Visitors often asked about it, and Kofi would tell them the story of how he had taught himself to play on cardboard keys while dreaming of touching real ones. That cardboard piano represents something very important, Kofi would explain to people. It represents the idea that if you really want something and you are willing to work for it, you should never let anything stop you from trying. Now, as Kofi waited to walk onto the stage of the National Theatre, he thought about all the people who had helped make this moment possible. Marcus and James, who had believed in him when he was just a nervous boy asking to touch their piano. Mr. Mensah, who had given him a key to the cafe and let him practice every morning. Dr. Ose, who had taught him advanced music theory. Mrs. Appiah, who had arranged his scholarship. His grandmother, who had worked so hard to take care of him and had always encouraged his dreams even when they seemed impossible. 5 minutes until showtime, said the stage manager. Kofi took a deep breath and looked at his hands. These were the same hands that had pressed invisible keys on a piece of cardboard just 6 months ago. Now they were about to perform a piano concerto with a full symphony orchestra in front of 800 people. The conductor of the youth orchestra, Maestro Kwame, came over to where Kofi was standing. "How are you feeling, young maestro?" he asked with a kind smile. "Nervous," Kofi admitted, "but also very excited." "Good," Maestro Kwame said. "Nervousness means you care about doing well. But remember, you have practiced this piece hundreds of times. Your fingers know exactly what to do. Trust them and trust the music." Kofi nodded. He had been working on this piece, Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 21, for 3 months. At first, the music had seemed impossibly difficult, but Dr. Ose had helped him break it down into small parts. And slowly, piece by piece, Kofi had learned to play every note perfectly. "Places, everyone," called the stage manager. The members of the youth orchestra walked onto the stage first, carrying their instruments. Kofi could hear the audience clapping as each musician took their seat. Then it was time for him to walk out. As Kofi stepped onto the stage, the bright lights made it hard for him to see the audience clearly, but he could feel their presence. 800 people had come to hear him play. Some of them had traveled from other cities just for this concert. The theater was completely sold out. He walked to the beautiful grand piano that sat in the center of the stage. This piano was even more magnificent than the one at Mr. Mensah's cafe. Its black surface gleamed under the stage lights. And when Kofi sat down at the bench, he felt like he was sitting in front of the most important instrument in the world. The audience became completely quiet. Maestro Kwame raised his baton and the orchestra began to play the opening of the concerto. The music filled the theater with beautiful, complex sounds. Violins sang high melodies while cellos provided rich, low harmonies. Flutes danced above, the strings like birds flying over a forest. Then came Kofi's entrance. He placed his hands on the keys and began to play his first solo passage. The piano sang out clear and strong, weaving its melody through the orchestra's accompaniment. All of Kofi's nervousness disappeared the moment he started playing. This was where he belonged. This was what he was born to do. For the next 30 minutes, Kofi played some of the most challenging piano music ever written, and he played it flawlessly. But more than that, he played it with the same soul and emotion that had amazed people 6 months ago at the cafe. Even though this was classical European music written hundreds of years ago, Kofi made it sound fresh and alive and full of his own unique musical personality. During one particularly difficult section where his hands had to move incredibly fast across the keys, someone in the audience gasped in amazement. During a slow, beautiful section where the piano played a melody that sounded like someone singing a lullaby, Kofi could hear people crying softly in the audience. In the front row, his grandmother watched with pride and wonder. She remembered the little boy who used to hum melodies while doing his homework. She remembered finding him on the floor of their tiny room, moving his fingers on a piece of cardboard. Now that same boy was performing with a symphony orchestra, making music so beautiful that it brought tears to the eyes of everyone who heard it. Also in the audience were Marcus and James, who had flown back to Ghana especially for this concert. Marcus wiped tears from his eyes as he watched his former student perform. "I knew he was special," he whispered to James, "but I never imagined he would develop this quickly." James was recording the concert on his camera, planning to share it with music schools around the world. "My father is going to want to bring Kofi to London immediately," he whispered back. "The Royal Academy of Music has been asking about him ever since they saw our first video." When Kofi finished the final, triumphant passage of the concerto, the theater exploded with applause. The entire audience stood up and clapped and cheered for several minutes. Some people were shouting, "Bravo!" Others were crying with joy. The members of the orchestra were smiling and applauding along with the audience. Kofi stood up from the piano bench and bowed to the audience, just like Dr. Osei had taught him to do. The applause got even louder. Maestro Kwame came over and shook Kofi's hand, then gestured for him to bow again. "Speech! Speech!" someone in the audience called out. Kofi looked at Maestro Kwame, who nodded and handed him a microphone. "Thank you," Kofi said, his voice echoing through the theater. 6 months ago, I was just a boy who dreamed of touching a real piano. I had never imagined that I would someday play in a place like this, with musicians this talented, for people this wonderful. The audience applauded again. "I want to thank some very special people," Kofi continued. "My grandmother, who worked so hard to take care of me, and who always believed in my dreams even when we had very little money. Marcus and James, who heard something special in my music and decided to help me learn and grow. Mr. Mensah, who let me practice on his piano every morning. Dr. Osei, who taught me so much about music theory and composition. Mrs. Appiah and the Ghana Music Foundation, who gave me opportunities I never could have imagined." He paused and looked around the theater. "But most of all, I want to thank music itself. Music is a gift that belongs to everyone, not just to people who can afford expensive instruments and lessons. Music lives inside all of us, waiting to be discovered. Sometimes all we need is someone to believe in us and give us a chance." The audience gave him another standing ovation. After the concert, there was a reception where people could meet Kofi and the other musicians. Dozens of people came up to shake his hand and tell him how much his playing had moved them. A woman from the American embassy told him that several universities in America wanted to offer him full scholarships. A man from the British Council said that music schools in England were interested in working with him. A representative from the South African College of